Verses 13 to 20. One would have expected that such a miracle as Christ wrought upon the blind man would have settled his reputation, and silenced and shamed all opposition, but it had the contrary effect. Instead of being embraced as a prophet for it, he is prosecuted as a criminal. Here is the information that was given into the Pharisees concerning this matter. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. v. 13. They brought him to the great Sanhedrim, which consisted chiefly of Pharisees. At least the Pharisees in the Sanhedrim were most active against Christ. 1. Some think that those who brought this man to the Pharisees did it with a good design, to show them that this Jesus, whom they persecuted, was not what they represented him, but really a great man, and one that gave considerable proofs of a divine mission. What hath convinced us of the truth and excellency of religion, and hath removed our prejudices against it, we should be forward, as we have opportunity, to offer to others for their conviction. 2. It should seem, rather, that they did it with an ill design, to exasperate the Pharisees the more against Christ, and there was no need of this, for they were bitter enough of themselves. They brought him with such a suggestion as that in ch. 11:47, 48, if we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him. Note, those rulers that are of a persecuting spirit shall never want ill instruments about them, that will blow the coals, and make them worse. The ground which was pretended for this information, and the color given to it. That which is good was never maligned but under the imputation of something evil. And the crime objected here, v. 14, was that it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay, and opened his eyes. The profanation of the Sabbath day is certainly wicked, and gives a man a very ill character, but the traditions of the Jews had made that to be a violation of the law of the Sabbath, which was far from being so. Many a time this matter was contested between Christ and the Jews, that it might be settled for the benefit of the Church in all ages. But it may be asked, why would Christ not only work miracles on the Sabbath day, but work them in such a manner as he knew would give offense to the Jews? When he had healed the impotent man, why should he bid him carry his bed? Could he not have cured this blind man without making clay? I answer, he would not seem to yield to the usurped power of the scribes and Pharisees. Their government was illegal, their impositions were arbitrary, and their zeal for the rituals consumed the substantials of religion, and therefore Christ would not give place to them, by subjection, no, not for an hour. Christ was made under the law of God, but not under their law. He did it that he might, both by word and action, expound the law of the fourth commandment, and vindicate it from their corrupt glosses, and so teach us that a weekly Sabbath is to be perpetually observed in the Church, 1 day in 7, for what need was there to explain that law, if it must be presently abrogated, and that it is not to be so ceremonially observed by us as it was by the Jews? Works of necessity and mercy are allowed, and the Sabbath rest to be kept, not so much for its own sake as in order to the Sabbath work. 3. Christ chose to work his cures on the Sabbath day to dignify and sanctify the day, and to intimate that spiritual cures should be wrought mostly on the Christian Sabbath day. How many blind eyes have been opened by the preaching of the gospel, that blessed eye salve, on the Lord's day? How many impotent souls cured on that day? The trial and examination of this matter by the Pharisees, v. 15. So much passion, prejudice, and ill humor, and so little reason, appear here, that the discourse is nothing but crossing questions. One would think, when a man in these circumstances was brought before them, they would have been so taken up in admiring the miracle, and congratulating the happiness of the poor man, that they could not have been peevish with him. But their enmity to Christ had divested them of all manner of humanity, and divinity too. Let us see how they teased this man. They interrogated him concerning the cure itself. They doubted whether he had indeed been born blind, and demanded proof of that which even the prosecutors had acknowledged, v. 18. They did not believe, that is, they would not, that he was born blind. Men that seek occasion to quarrel with the clearest truths may find it if they please, and they that resolve to hold fast deceit will never want a handle to hold it by. This was not a prudent caution, but a prejudiced infidelity. However, it was a good way that they took for the clearing of this. They called the parents of the man who had received his sight. This they did in hopes to disprove the miracle. These parents were poor and timorous, and if they had said that they could not be sure that this was their son, or that it was only some weakness or dimness in his sight that he had been born with, which if they had been able to get help for him might have been cured long since, or had otherwise prevaricated, for fear of the court, the Pharisees had gained their point, had robbed Christ of the honor of this miracle, which would have lessened the reputation of all the rest. But God so ordered and overruled this counsel of theirs that it turned to the more effectual proof of the miracle, and left them under a necessity of being either convinced or confounded. Now in this part of the examination we have the questions that were put to them. v. They asked them in an imperious threatening way, "Is this your son? Dare you swear to it? Do you say he was born blind? Are you sure of it? Or did he but pretend to be so, to have an excuse for his begging? How then doth he now see? That is impossible, and therefore you had better unsay it." Those who cannot bear the light of truth do all they can to eclipse it, and hinder the discovery of it. Thus the managers of evidence, or mismanagers rather, lead witnesses out of the way, and teach them how to conceal or disguise the truth, and so involve themselves in a double guilt, like that of Jeroboam, who sinned, and made Israel to sin. Their answers to these interrogatories, in which, first, they fully attest that which they could safely say in this matter, safely, that is, upon their own knowledge, and safely, that is, without running themselves into a premunire. v. We know that this is our son, for they were daily conversant with him, and had such a natural affection to him as the true mother had. 1 Key 3:26, which made them know it was their own, and we know that he was born blind. They had reason to know it, inasmuch as it had cost them many a sad thought, and many a careful troublesome hour, about him. How often had they looked upon him with grief, and lamented their child's blindness more than all the burdens and inconveniences of their poverty, and wished he had never been born, rather than be born to such an uncomfortable life. Those who are ashamed of their children, or any of their relations, because of their bodily infirmities, may take a reproof from these parents, who freely owned, "This is our son, though he was born blind, and lived upon alms." Secondly, they cautiously decline giving any evidence concerning his cure, partly because they were not themselves eyewitnesses of it, and could say nothing to it of their own knowledge, and partly because they found it was a tender point, and would not bear to be meddled with. And therefore, having owned that he was their son and was born blind, further these deponents say not,